Hey, my name is Arnie. I'm from the Vaccines, and you're listening to Recess with Spinelli.
You are listening to Recess with Spinelli, WSPN 91.1 FM, Skidmore College Radio. And today we are here with Arnie from the indie rock band from London, England, The Vaccines. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Now, you guys just released your third studio LP, English Graffiti, on the 25th of May. Now, there's been a lot of statements about this from you guys, and that it's supposed to be genre-defining so that everybody can hate it 10 years from now. What exactly is that supposed to mean?
So, that's not supposed to mean anything. In all honesty, the Anime, the magazine Anime New Musical Express, which is a British, well, for those that don't know it, it's a British sort of institution. They're very famous for pull quotes.
Is that one of them?
That's definitely one of them. And what they're really good at is every single journalist becomes a really good friend of yours, and you sort of go out with them and you become like drunk and weird and say stupid stuff, and then they use that as headlines.
So this was after a late night of drinking?
Well, it's just like enemy journalism. It's basically just like we will throw you off the boat whenever you possibly can. But equally, I think there's a sentiment to it that is truthful, and I think that's in the sense that like we're a band that has always strived to be timeless, in the sense that you wouldn't be able to time our sort of plays our music in time, because we wanted to sound like it could have been made at any point in the last 50 years. And then we realized that timelessness doesn't come from being timeless, but because it actually comes from being off a time. And I think like we sort of decided to embrace the sort of disposability of modern music and time ourselves, like make a record that only sounded like it could have been made now.
So what does, I guess, disposable sound like versus timeless? What's the difference?
These are disposable. I mean disposability in terms of like in terms of trends. There's nothing disposable about the actual music, but the trends nowadays, they move so quickly that like I can listen to pop music and I can almost tell you like what sort of half of which year it came from by now, like because the trends move so quickly. We wanted to basically trying to surpass a trend but still make something that sounded only like it could have been made now, and something that we would even like kind of frown upon in a year's time. We kind of go, oh, that's so like 2015, you know what I mean? So
what does the first half of 2015 sound like then?
I think there's a sense of minimalism, especially in pop music. Pop music is like extremely brave in the sense that it was actually late 2014. But if you think about "Shake It Off," for example, there's a MIDI saxophone line, a drum beat, and nothing else. There's nothing else to that song, and this is the sort of people are boldly embracing mixes and melodies rather than relying on heavy instrumentation.
What exactly did you guys do differently from your last work to now to make it a little bit more 2015, late 2014?
Everything. Basically, we basically recorded the first two albums live, right? Like on the second album, we even did the vocals live, which is just unheard of these days. Like no label in the right mind would ever release an album when the vocals were recorded live, but we somehow got away with it.
Well, doesn't that take a certain amount of skill to record live?
Well, it does. Of course, it does. It also sets you up like a little bit of like a sort of a safety barrier, because when you can say you recorded it live, people sort of say, "Oh, okay," which is great for that. You know, it's not particularly good for anything else, but it's great for that. You really have to hone your craft in order to be able to do that. But in order to like be relevant this day and age, you need to be making music that doesn't sound like anything else. We basically decided to try and make an album that sounded like it couldn't possibly be made, couldn't be recreated by anybody or even us.
Was there one specific thing that you did to make that possible? Well, do you have an example?
There's not a single bar of music on that album that is actually played humanly. I don't think there is. I think every single part of it is edited in some way. There's almost no synthesizers whatsoever, and the first thing that people say to me is like, I love the synthesizers, but they're not synthesizers. They're either me shouting into a microphone through effects, or Freddie playing guitar through, like, you know what I mean? It's just like there's so much sound manipulation that like stuff we've never done before.
Now, I guess one of the things, or one of the the commentaries on, I guess, computers versus humans with music is that humans do make mistakes, which is what you could get with recording live versus editing it. What are some of the pros and cons, I guess, of making music sound perfect via computer?
I think perfection is actually something that you try more to. You try to achieve more when you do it live than when you're doing it on computers, because majority of the stuff, well, not majority, but there are countless things that come up when you're editing a song or when you're like f***ing with the synthesizers or something that are total mistakes, and they just happen to, like, you're like, where did that come from? Especially working with Dave Friedman, the producer, like one of the producers of the album. He basically relies on the mistakes to happen. Like, that human element is in fact the controlling element of the digitized version.
In between your first and second LPs, there was just 1 year difference, if I'm correct, right? Whereas now there's a 3 year?
Yeah.
Was this the reason why it took longer to produce this album? Because you're trying to do something different consciously?
No, I think the second album was released very, very quickly, because at the time we were like really desperate to keep going, and we've been touring like maniacs, and we just desperately wanted new music out in order to keep touring, and we just did an album, and we didn't really put a lot of thought into it. Sort of, I'm still very proud of the album, but I think like we probably could have done with a bit more time and reflection. And this time around, we only stopped touring the second album, in like beginning of 2014. So in 2014, we all go on like a small couple of weeks holiday, and then we start working on the third album. And we decided to it was the first time we've ever had the benefit of time.
Now, today, there is this notion that there's this pressure for bands to release things on a constant monthly basis, essentially, because albums don't exactly have a long lifespan, so they try and spread it out a lot with EPs now. So do you guys ever feel pressure to release on a regular basis, and how does that work if you're trying to make something that represents a very specific time? Can you realistically keep up with trying to represent the time, or by the time you produce something, is it already gone?
This is a great question. I don't think there is an answer to that. I think you're right. I think currently bands should be releasing music more frequently, and they should be doing it even on a smaller scale. Like, music should be made available like digitally pretty quickly and pretty regularly. But equally, I think there's also like a level of I think that there is something to be said for holding back in order to create a little bit of excitement about something, rather than being constantly available. There's a sense of mystique that sort of comes with a band basically just disappearing for a while and then coming back with something. And whether that's positive or negative is anybody's guess. But I think there's like two schools of thoughts here, and any musician in the world right now is struggling with which side of that argument there should be. I don't have an answer to that.
So it's all experimentation right now, really.
Right, but that's what makes it really exciting. Like, currently, I genuinely think that the major label format, the way that we know it right now, is going to be dead within a couple of years. I have got no faith in this actually being sustainable for any period of time. But it just means that everybody is guessing. My guess is as good as anybody else's. We've got no idea what's going to happen. But it's exciting because it allows for a lot of creativity.
Speaking to a few other bands about this, the last one is the Wombats, and it seems to be a thing, especially with British bands, is this definition of indie versus pop versus rock. What do you consider yourselves exactly?
Oh yeah, so actually this is actually sort of, because you opened the interview saying I'm here with Andy from the indie band Vaccine. And see, an indie, in my mind, I think it's I don't know if it's a cultural sort of lost in translation thing or what it is, but historically, an indie band is basically just somebody that's signed to an independent label. Vaccines have never been signed to an independent label. Never.
So you do find it weird that name has been attached to you guys?
Oh yeah, because I'm a big fan of a lot of indie music, and I don't consider us in that game. Indie is, in my mind, it represents a lack of aspiration. It's basically sort of a half-assed attempt at doing something, you know. And whilst I love it, like there's a lot of indie bands that I absolutely love and adore, I don't think Pavement ever tried to achieve anything else than what they were. I don't even think they tried to achieve that. They just became a very important, beautiful entity in modern music. Whilst I think we're a band that aspires to shit. Like we want to grow, and personally we're all a hell of a lot more esoteric than our music represents. But I think as a band we're heavily aspirational. We're a rock band. We're not an indie band.
All right, and going back to some of your beginnings, back in 2010. I believe that's when you guys first got your real catch on radio play. That was with Zane Lowe when he aired If You Wanna.
Who's now relocated to the US of A, hasn't he?
Oh, really?
Yeah. He just got headhunted by Apple, so he left Radio 1 in the UK and he's now in the States. Yeah, he's in California.
So what about that initial publicity, I guess, got you guys forward? How did that help exactly?
Just in every possible way imaginable. We were actually thinking about this the other day. Like there's we owe BBC a lot. BBC is and has been and continues to be incredibly supportive of new artists in whatever sense that may be, and we were one of the beneficiaries of that.
But when someone like Zane Lowe airs your tracks and gets you guys that attention, is it the listeners that try and find you and buy music, or is it more of like a label or a producer? How does that translate into you guys actually earning a living?
It hasn't translated into any money just yet, but and it probably never will. But no, I don't. There are certain people in the world that are capable of calling themselves tastemakers, and the way that they do that is by supporting something and then making it. Basically, at the end of Zane Lowe endorsement, we sold out a show, and that show was full of people from all walks of life, but there was like lots of boring old suits from labels and promoters or whatever, but there was also lots of kids. And
do you think there still is a future in radio helping musicians get a career started?
I think it's becoming like more anarchic, actually. I think it's basically by now it's just like every man for himself. I think radio DJ is stupendously important still, but no, I don't think that's going to disappear. I think like tastemakers and people that are willing to take the risks on new music are going to retain importance.
So maybe not necessarily radio, but just someone to curate new music, to say this is what is cool, this is what's hot today.
But I think every format's going to change. I think like the way that we release music is going to change, the way that we present it, the way that we listen to it, the way that we broadcast it. But I love it. It's amazing. We'll land somewhere, God knows where. Doesn't matter for now.
All right, is there anything else you would like to add for the listeners?
I think I'm all right. I've talked a lot.
All right, well, thank you so much for your time.
Cheers, man. Thank you very much.
You have been listening to Recess with Spinelli, WSPN 91.1 FM, Skidmore College Radio, and we have been speaking with Arnie of The Vaccines.